Welcome, friends, it's the Movie Film Podcast. Movie Film Podcast, enjoy the show. Zaki and Brian are talking about movies. Movie Film Podcast on the radio.
Welcome to Movie Film. It's episode 293. I'm Zaki Hassan. I'm here with Brian Hall.
Hey, how's it going, Zaki?
You know, it's almost like I was just talking to you yesterday.
I know, it feels that way for me, too. It's like you were just with me in some way.
I was hanging about in spirit, or more accurately, in person, because I was actually down in SoCal.
I drove you back to the airport last night, less than 24 hours ago.
So we recorded our Bad Boys commentary. The next morning, I hopped on the plane and came here. And then I flew back last night, and this afternoon here we are talking about Bad Boys. So when people say, "Hey, do you guys like hanging out? Do you actually like each other?" I think this is proof, right? I think.
You know, I was talking to my parents on the phone while I was driving home from the airport, and they're like, "So what did you guys do?" And I was like, you know, the first day I was like, we literally talked the entire day.
That's true. That is true.
And then we had like a day where we kind of went out and about, and then it was like the next day we just talked. Like we literally did like 18 podcasts this weekend. And dude, there was points we were just like riffing on stuff, and I was in tears. Like it was great. It was a great time. Yes,
we got to set up that Patreon so people can have opportunity to hear that type of thing, right?
Yes, yeah. At home with Brian and Zaki.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this is what when we don't talk about movies. What is you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For example, you can hear Brian's views about saxophone music, unvarnished.
You know, that became kind of a thing, actually.
You've taken some heavy fire for that.
I was a little. Well, I guess I'm not surprised. But I know it started in the Mad Max commentary where I was saying it looked a little goofy having Max's wife romantically sort of serenading him with this giant ass saxophone between her legs, you know, like it just looked weird. And then there was something else that I don't remember. It came up one more time, but I mentioned it in the Furiosa episode. And then after that posted, it was like, ding, 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 ding. These comments about Charles Landy. I wrote it down. It said, despite Brian's blatant and shocking anti-Saxitism, this was a solid episode. And then David Gutierrez put, Brian is an anti-Saxer? What? So, but on that post, I did put, yes, occasionally in the 80s, I find the saxophone a little goofy in the way that it's utilized as sort of a rock and roll instrument. I specifically with Rob Lowe in St. Elmo's Fire, I think I find these certain portrayals of it kind of funny, honestly. But I am not an anti-saxer. And then I posted several songs, that I thought highlighted saxophone quite well and showed how amazing an instrument it is. And then other people added their songs, and it was a grand old time, hopefully. Or me just backpedaling. I don't know.
I think it's more the latter. That's my guess. And I just want it on the record. I adore saxophone music. Good, bad, classy, sleazy, doesn't even matter. Doesn't matter what movie I'm watching. There's not a movie alive that cannot be improved with saxophone music. In fact, I would offer that the Death Star trench run from Star Wars would be better if it was used only sax music, only sax.
I was already prepared to be like, Zaki, I do not believe there is a saxophone in the Star Wars score in that moment with the trench run. But You're right. Would have been better.
Would have been better.
Well, how about that? And it was funny. You said to me, well, now you finally had your Bob Barker moment.
It's true.
But anyway, that caught me by surprise, but I thought it was hilarious, and I appreciated people reaching out about it.
Well, that was actually the reason I flew down there was to offer comfort. After the barrage of incoming that you took, so I was happy to be there. What else? Hey, this is rare. Like during our what else have we seen? We watched stuff together.
I know. I was writing down all the movies I'd watched recently, and they were with you. So we can basically... Actually, I had one thing I was going to bring up, which I didn't watch recently, but we were at the theater to watch Bad Boys 4, and I noticed that Netflix's Hitman, the Richard
Mhm.
Linklater movie, was still there. Meaning, I was surprised it got a theatrical release at all,
Yeah.
since it was purchased by the streaming company. But I also, looking ahead for movies to watch this week and next week, it will continue to be playing there, which was to my surprise.
Wow.
So I don't know. I just kind of wanted to, we're talking a lot about box office and what a unique time it is for theaters specifically, theatrical movie going. And I just thought it was fascinating, that Netflix decided that this movie should be put in theaters at all, which is cool.
Yeah.
I like that there's the option. And hey, if it's there for a week or two, that's how I'd prefer to see it. But also it's available I was talking to a friend right before we hopped on, and she has kids, and she and her husband watched it at home in 2 parts because
I really want to watch it.
Yeah. So, I like that it's available for however best, different lifestyles.
Yeah.
And I look forward to, I actually saw it as a test screening about a year ago. So that was the last time I saw it. It's been a while. But I do remember liking it. It just felt very different. It's kind of funny. It's kind of sexy. It's like one of a sexier movie than I've seen in a while.
Is there sax music on the soundtrack?
You know what? I wouldn't doubt it. Maybe that's why. Maybe it isn't sexy at all, but just because the sax was featured on the score. But no, it's kind of fun, and it's got a little edge to it, a little dark.
Well, I want to ask. I mean, I know that you in the past you've expressed sort of you've been hot and cold on Glenn Powell. Is that a accurate characterization?
We've talked about this a lot, where you realize that Hollywood is presenting a potential leading man to you.
Right.
And they're almost like, what do you think?
What do you think? How about in this? How about in a rom-com? How about into this?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think I was realizing that was happening with Glenn Powell. And it was like he was straddling a line for me where he was he was great in Maverick. And then maybe I saw him in something else that I don't recall where he didn't make a huge impression. And I was like, oh, so I don't know. And then you start to wonder, is this being insisted upon me, so to speak? We said that phrase a lot this weekend. But then you, on a previous episode, I believe, said he was wonderful in Richard Linklater's Everybody Wants Some.
Yes.
And based on that statement alone, I rewatched it. I had seen it before, but had kind of forgotten it. And I rewatched it, and he is really good in that movie.
He is.
And it's one of those roles where it would not be that character or that likable of a character if it were not for what he's bringing.
That is the first time I saw him was in that movie, and I think that's why I've always liked him. Yeah,
and I think in Hitman, he has a lot going for him, but I don't think he's supposed to play kind of a nerdier person who puts on a persona of a cooler guy, and it's I didn't quite buy the nerdier persona. I only bought the cool guy persona, and so I was like, oh, okay, well, and then but with Twisters coming up, every time I see the trailer, I'm like, no, that's right for him. That feels right. So
it seemed very charming in that trailer.
Yeah. So he's McConaughey-ish without the sort of hippy-dippy part of it, I guess. But
McConaughey, if you remember, McConaughey was a little bit of that too.
He was kind of losing people for a minute, and then he was like, well, then I'm going to stop. I think he's spoken about this. He intentionally stepped away from the predictable sorts of things he was doing, like Kate Hudson movies and whatnot. Yeah. And then he, was doing Dallas Buyers Club and Interstellar and all these sorts of things. And now I think he's kind of cemented himself as, McConaughey. Okay, well, what's he up to?
He had been in like Dazed and Confused before that, but like when Time to Kill came out, I remember it was like, here he is, everyone. Here's our, the smoke went up from the Vatican. It's like, here's our new, here's our new.
Or actually, the smoke from the brisket smoker.
There you go. And I've talked about it in the show. He is fantastic in Time to Kill. You're like, oh, he's a movie star. Yeah. But it took a few strikes of the flint before it took,
and that's the weird thing also about being an actor or an actress. I feel like you can be magnificent, but if you don't find those roles that really highlight the thing that you do, you may not really have the opportunity to win people's hearts, So when they find that thing and then Hollywood catches on to it and goes, oh, that's their groove. If they're lucky enough to find that groove, I think that's when those people sort of get cemented.
As an opposing version of one that didn't really work, in my opinion, is I remember like around, I don't know, whatever, 98, Gretchen Mol was like the hot thing.
She is, yes. I mean, well, now it didn't help that she had a magazine cover, right? That was
Yes.
like the new it girl.
Right.
And then it's like, okay, pressure much?
Right.
And
she was in Rounders, I think.
Yes. And
That was
she had a
the movie.
rough go of it after that. Like she didn't find her groove right away. I think she has found a groove now.
Yeah.
I remember Boardwalk Empire specifically, and I see she's in all sorts of sort of prestige shows now. But yeah, that's a great example.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, now I'm looking at her stuff. Like 310 to Yuma, I didn't even remember she was in that.
Yeah, I forgot she was in that. Wow.
Yeah, but Boardwalk Empire, I remember she really shined in.
Well, enough about It Boy's present and future. Let's talk about It Boy's past.
Yes.
Because we dipped into the archives. We went way back. We watched Sudden Death from 1995.
A Van Damme movie.
Yes.
If that title was didn't immediately recall something to mind for you guys. So wait, how did we start with this?
So I'll tell you exactly. So when I was down there, you were looking at like what are some movies, like old timey movies that are playing at some of the theaters down there.
Mm-hmm.
And the is it the New Beverly that Tarantino owns?
Yeah, I wanted to take you to the New Beverly or the Vista or something. So we were looking up what was playing.
So they were playing 2010.
The Vista was, yes.
Yes, that's right. Directed by the Vista, directed by Peter Hyams. And of course, this is the sequel to 2001. And I think you had just seen 2010 recently, is my recollection.
And past 2 years, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, and we were both kind of like, it's okay, it was fine,
Mm-hmm.
And I said, Peter Hyams directed that, and he's an interesting cat because he's like he's working as a DP now, but he started out directing, and he did a movie called Outland starring Sean Connery, which I like. He did Time Cop starring Van Damme, which I also liked, and he did Sudden Death starring Van Damme, which I said is a total Die Hard on a or Die Hard in a fill in the blank, which for those of you who don't know, the 90s were just overflowing with movies following that template.
Yeah.
And I said, well, this is probably one of the better examples of doing something in that vein. And you hadn't seen it, and it had been a while since I saw it, so I think we were just like, well, why don't we watch it?
And I was not a huge Van Damme guy.
Sure.
I think I saw was it Hard Target and maybe like one other, but it was
when you were younger.
When I was younger, I think it didn't help that I was a little young, like so it was harder to see R-rated movies, but also I don't know, he was kind of like Schwarzenegger backup, so I was always picking a Schwarzenegger movie over Van Damme.
Yeah.
But so even when we started it, I was a little like, well, okay, like I didn't have like high expectations.
Yeah.
And audience, let me tell you, I think this was one of the most fun 2 hours we had all weekend. Right?
I agree.
We had a blast. We had an absolute blast with this movie. It is like an elevated B movie.
Yes.
I mean, there's no getting, sugarcoating it. But
you get what's on the tin. Don't expect any surprises.
Absolutely. And at the same time, the premise is super fun. I mean, like you were saying, Die Hard is Die Hard at a hockey game. So you have a hockey stadium filled with a crowd. Van Damme's kids are in there. He's working security and stuff is going down, and so, and then just all the possibilities of what can happen, fighting a bad guy dressed as a mascot in the kitchen, and which was ridiculous on the face of it, but halfway through I was like, this is actually kind of a good fight. I mean, it was staged well. They utilized everything that was in the kitchen creatively. I was actually like, this is a cool, captivating fight. And when it came down to the third act, and there's this huge face off on top of the stadium as the dome on top of it is slowly opening, and there's a helicopter in play. I mean, you're dealing with the 90s. There's no CGI enhancing this thing. There's no fake looking sort of backdrop. Like it's just two stunt dudes where I even looked at you. I was like, dude, that guy could die.
Yeah.
He's hanging off that thing. And it's thrilling in a unique way that only 90s movies can be thrilling anymore, just because it's all so tactile. How was it for you revisiting it? I mean,
well, that's the crazy thing, because the last time I saw it was via VHS rental, back when it came out. So it's been about 30 years since I watched it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd forgotten most of it. Like there were plot twists that I'd completely forgotten about,
Mm-hmm.
And so that was fun. It was virtually like watching a new movie. The other thought I had is I agree with you. Van Damme was never like my particular flavor. I ended up watching more than a handful of his movies, but this is one of the better, mainstream big budget releases starring him, because it kind of avoids the trying to force in his martial arts and things like that. Instead, he's we don't no splits in this, for one thing. Every movie it seems like they always found a way to have him do the splits. But instead he feels like he's in over his head, and there's an actual performance that he's giving. I mean, he's not Olivier, you know what I mean?
True.
But like,
yes.
But
he's playing a character for sure.
Exactly. And I thought Powers Booth as the villain is great.
He's great. I will say he walks right up to that post Pulp Fiction line of trying to make his speech a little more flowery, and like it was starting to grate on me a little bit, but through no fault of his own, by the way. He's fantastic, but you can see it sort of reminds me, what was that John Travolta movie, Broken Arrow or something, where he's full Tarantino
right around the same time.
Yeah, it was like that flavor was starting to creep into the villains, I think. But he himself is fantastic and very menacing.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a great. I mean, it's a movie of a type that I just don't. It feels like the market doesn't exist for it anymore, and that's just a bummer.
Yeah, you're right. I don't even know what to compare it to, honestly.
Right. This is a. If you're in junior high or high school, you're hanging out with your buddies and having a sleepover, and you put this on. That's, to me.
I forgot, dude. I said that to you during the movie. I said this movie feels like it was written by a 14-year-old boy.
Yeah, that's right.
And I was like running down everything that just happened. I'm like, right? Is that everything a 14-year-old boy would think of? And, that was another thing too. When it started, it said it was rated R for like sustained. What was it? Like something like sustained. Strong violence or something. And I was like, wow, it's funny. It doesn't just say violence or strong violence,
right?
But it had like even more adjectives added to it or something. But
I didn't find it any more violent than like your diehards or whatever. It seemed like kind of in that neighborhood.
I was telling you, actually, I found it a hair past Die Hard, which I was trying to figure out how to express, because Die Hard is very violent. We talk about it as like sort of those 80s squib movies where the bullet, hits that people take are really powerful and violent and kind of, pack a punch, an extra punch than they do these days. And this movie has that to a degree, but it also, I was saying there was like moments where some movies, even like a Die Hard, would sort of cut away from what was about to happen. But this one like tightens its focus a little bit, like just a little bit into that sort of pulpier aspect than like a Die Hard, which might exercise a little more tact, if that's even the right word.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, that was kind of part of its charm, weirdly. And like, I have to add though, you and I were riffing the whole movie, and so I know that definitely added to the experience.
Yeah, we were having fun. We were MST3K'ing this thing.
Yeah. So I
was actually I was telling you, I was kind of proud of ourselves, right? Because we do our commentary tracks, and we watch the film beforehand, we make notes, and maybe even think of things to say. This one, it was like a commentary track without a net.
Yeah, we had we do this all the time, but I don't think we've ever done it to this degree. To the point afterwards, we were like, man, we should have recorded that.
Yeah. That's right.
Dude, yeah. I mean, I was in tears. I was laughing so hard sometimes.
I thought it was a fun time.
Yeah.
There's my verdict on sudden death.
You know, it was cool. We were talking about Die Hard on a fill in the blank and how that was such a thing. And then we were like, why doesn't it just come full circle and we just do Die Hard on a Die Hard? And that would be someone is at a screening of Die Hard.
Yep.
At like the New Beverly or something. And then terrorists take it over. So they have to stop the bad guys while Die Hard is playing.
We just put that out into the universe.
Yep. Someone run with it, please.
If somebody runs with it, just give us an inspired by credit.
Exactly. That's all I ask.
But what else did we see, Brian?
I don't remember how this one came up either.
Well, we had. I'll tell you. We talked about it while recording our Bad Boys 1 commentary.
Okay. We watched Tony Scott's Enemy of the State.
Yes.
From 1998.
Which somehow you had managed to not see.
It occurred to me about 15 minutes in that I think I had seen it.
Okay.
But not since probably 1998.
Yeah, same here.
And so I remembered certain parts of it. They were coming back to me, but it was super enjoyable because really I didn't remember where it was going or how it ended or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And we both liked it. This one too.
Yeah. Just an artifact of a bygone era, it feels like.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can express this better than I can. I can see why it doesn't get recalled a lot for some strange reason, but it was a totally competent, entertaining 1998 thriller at the same time.
That about sums it up. I mean, it very much in the vein of Tony Scott's movies of that era. Mm-hmm. It's packed to the gills with familiar faces.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like practically every shot, we're like, hey,
yeah,
that person,
Jack Black in like a 7th tier role playing,
right?
Like a hacker.
Jack Black, Jamie Kennedy, Seth Green, Barry Pepper, Scott Conn, Jake Busey. Those are just the bad guys.
Yeah.
Right, and then you got like Jason Lee, Jason Robards, Regina King.
Yeah.
Regina King in lingerie, which is like, expect like respected director Regina King to be, like
we were playing the Cinematrix game all weekend on the New York, or what is that? Vulture.com.
Vulture.
And literally she was one of the rows that you had to guess her films the next day. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. All right, well, I already know one of them. That was amazing.
But really this was Will Smith's kind of, it was a proof of concept for Will Smith as a movie star when you think about it, right? Like Bad Boys, it's an action movie where he pairs up with Martin Lawrence. Independence Day, it's him in a big summer spectacle. In Man in Black, he's paired with Tommy Lee Jones. Enemy of the State is just Will Smith without a parachute,
Yeah, kind of a grown-up thriller.
Yes.
Right, where Bad Boys is a little more comedic. He's more familiar territory for him and for the audience and what they expect of him. But this feels like now I'm doing like a grown-up movie. Let's see how this goes.
Well, that's the thought I had while watching, because there's 3 years between Bad Boys and Enemy of the State. I was like, and you tell me if you feel this. I feel like his performance in Enemy of the State is noticeably better than in Bad Boys.
Yeah, not that I would pick apart Bad Boys in any way.
No,
but it definitely feels like solid actor.
Yeah, like that's like the Will Smith that the world knows. It feels like, the actor side and kind of
a lot more is asked with him.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so just it's I don't think it's gonna blow anybody away, but I think it's a very solid thing. You get a great performance by Gene Hackman. I said this in our commentary track, I believe, that it's kind of a pseudo sequel to The Conversation.
Mm-hmm. And but it also, there was one moment we were laughing where it's very 90s Bruckheimer.
Yes.
Where Will Smith goes into a lingerie shop to buy a Christmas gift for his wife, and all the employees are wearing lingerie.
Right.
We were like, okay, only in a Bruckheimer film.
As one does.
Yeah. But and also like Tony Scott, who we love, obviously, we were saying like as his career went on and on. I mean, you look at like Man on Fire, which was 2005, I want to say. And it started getting into that really hyper stylized aesthetic, right? With sort of more jittery cuts and playing with visuals, and even the subtitles I feel like have like a weird sort of heightened nature to them. And then you get to Domino, which is just like literally an acid trip of a movie. And this is like the Tony Scott that's my favorite, I think. Sort of the 80s, totally 90s, where it's definitely got those ingredients, you know, the I don't even know, man, his tight editing and the way he shoots action, it's just so great. So this was coming from, you know, part of his oeuvre that I just really love and connect with. So it was really cool to revisit. Stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Well, hey, let's take a short break and we'll come back and we got some listener letters. And we're back, and as mentioned earlier, we got a couple listener letters here. This is a comment we got at moviefilmpodcast@gmail.com from Alex Naom, and this is in reference to our Bad Boys track, which dropped mere days ago.
Yeah.
And Alex says, "Morning, gents. Another ripping commentary track. I really do enjoy listening to spin a yarn whilst watching pretty much anything. Your Bad Boys commentary did take me by surprise. I didn't think you'd be fawning over it, but I didn't expect quite as much criticism of the script. I've always thought that the identity swap aspect of the script was a unique flavor that this movie had over other buddy cop films, but it is interesting how you both said that would have been a good plot for the sequel. Maybe my glowing thoughts about the film are a product of when I first watched it a few years after its release, at age 10. The flashiness, awesome soundtrack, and kinetic action grabbed me from my first viewing. As I reached teenagehood, I marveled at Bay's framing of certain cast members, if you get my drift, before snapping out of that hypnotic state a few more years after that, and ever since feeling justifiably icky about it. Maybe 10 years old was the perfect age to fall in love with the Michael Bay Bad Boys film, because I was 15 when the sequel came out, and that was just an unpleasant assault on the senses. So yes, I was taken aback by your muted response to the film, but it was interesting hearing other perspectives on it. I still love you both, though. I agree with your praise of the shot selection and visual flourishes Bay put into this film. I had not thought about it much consciously in the past, and it was a bit of a eureka moment when you mentioned it. So thank you. I'll be sure to bask in that glory more upon my next rewatch. Many of the warmest regards."
I really appreciate that, Alex. I think I like hearing your perspective on it. And yeah, you know, Zaki, I have to say, I was a little surprised with us too. Because I remember really enjoying the movie, and I still enjoy it, by the way, for the record. But I think I was a little surprised it wasn't as perfect a package as I remembered it. And so then it was sort of viewing it through that lens, basically from the halfway point on, and go, oh, well, I didn't kind of expect that. It has a little saggy in the middle. And so then that became part of the conversation, I think, for you and I, right? Like, oh, yeah, I kind of had forgotten that this, and oh, maybe if they'd done that. And it became a little bit of that, maybe more than us or Alex expected. I mean, what's your take on that?
Well, I've said I think I said it in our commentary. I watched Bad Boys 2 in the theater, and I felt like I was just getting, you know, it was like a wind machine blasting in my face for 2 hours. You know, it was not a pleasant experience for me, and I was never in love with the original Bad Boys, but my experience with the second one made me put the two of them together, where I'm like, this is, you know, the sequel being sort of the final expression of Bay's aesthetic, you know, his approach. And that's what I was like. I always felt that the talents of the actors do a lot, but they can't make up for just the omnipresence of the Bay of it all, you know. And so what I said during our commentary, I'm like, I still feel it's like, look, the script is very weak, and the actors do a lot, but they can't fundamentally make up for what is a weak script, you know. And I think for the third one, and we'll be talking about the fourth one today, but what I really liked about the third one is that it's the sequel to the Bad Boys we remember. You know, it's like it's a sequel to those movies being better.
Sure.
You know, and I feel that about 3 and 4. I mean, I think just stylistically and everything, they represent an evolution that's just better than what Michael Bay did. But that's just me.
Yeah, it's like they lean into what they were almost anyway, and just
No, exactly.
celebrate it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's exactly it. Yeah. You know. But hey, Alex, let us know what you think about our thoughts on Bad Boys Ride or Die. Maybe you'll end up disagreeing even more. We'll have to see in a few short minutes. Here's a message I got on Twitter, or rather X, and this is from Jacob Dasher, who says, "Hi, Zaki, I love your show. You and Brian always make me laugh and think with your episodes and commentaries. I wanted to follow up on something you've said on the podcast as well as on Twitter about how you don't like canon. You called it canon, CANON, not canon as in the ordinance, or the 1970s television show starring William Conrad. Neither of those things." In case you're wondering, you remember Canon? It's about the overweight detective.
No.
You remember Jake and the Fat Man?
I do.
So William Conrad, who played the Fat Man in the 70s, he was on a show called Canon.
Oh, I did not know that.
He passed away a while ago. He was the narrator of Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Really? Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Anyway, I just
wish you could like write all this down somewhere. I feel like we need the scrolls, like when the EMP goes off, this stuff needs to be preserved. And I feel like everything that's in your mind, you could when people get activated in a movie, like, Shia LaBeouf in Transformers 2, where he writes, all of a sudden he gets activated and he starts writing all these formulas that are in his head down on it.
What purpose does this serve? I think about this often. I'm like, why do I know this? How does this help anybody? Me knowing, like we were having a conversation over the weekend. I don't even know how it came up. We started talking about the movie Midnight Run. And which for those of you who don't know, it's a well-regarded buddy movie starring Robert De Niro and Charles Grodin from the late 80s. And I said, Brian, did you know that there were several made-for-TV sequels to Midnight Run starring Christopher McDonald in the Robert De Niro role? And you said, what? And I said, yes, it's true. And I pulled it up on YouTube. And I said, look, here's Midnight Run Around, and here's another Midnight Run, and et cetera, et cetera. And you were like, wow, I did not know that. How did you know that? And I said, I don't know why I know that. And it's upsetting to me because I'm like, this is what I said to you on the weekend. I'm like, my brother, he's 5 years old, and my brother has memorized the Quran. He from end to end, he has the entire Quran memorized. Right. It's amazing. It's a multi-year effort. He put his mind to it. He did this thing that is just remarkable.
That was the word in my head. I was like, that is remarkable.
It is.
You and I Googled it because I wanted to see how long the audio version of the Quran was, just to have a sort of understanding of how much he memorized. 56 hours.
56 hours.
56 hours.
Amazing. Meanwhile, I know that there were several made-for-TV sequels to Midnight Run. There were also part of that same syndicated package, several made-for-TV sequels to Smokey and the Bandit, just called Bandit. Why do I need to know this?
You know what, though? This is what I hear when you say this. You have an incredible memory. And I love going down rabbit holes. If I watch a film, if I'm reading a book, if I learn some little snippet of history, I go straight to Google and I read all these articles, and I love devouring this stuff. I just gobble all this information up, but it doesn't stick. Sometimes it does. And maybe I'll encounter something that like sparks something in my brain that makes me recall something I read 10 years ago. But I don't have the stickiness. My memory's not as sticky as yours, and I don't have the recall that you do. So I think it's an incredible gift, honestly.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, and it's just, these are the things that maybe come up in conversation a lot with us because something will trigger that,
Yeah.
But I mean, there's so much stuff that you remember. I think it extends well beyond these sort of obscure things, but these are the fun things that come up most often.
Well, if you want to make it worth my while, next time you're at a party, find a way to drop a mention of the made-for-TV sequels to Midnight Run, and I know it'll have been worth it.
I will definitely do that. I'll find a way to work that in.
There you go. Don't let it die with me. Anyway, Jacob goes on. He says, so this is in reference to canon, like the canon that makes up various franchises.
Yes.
And I should say, this was in reference to, he says, you called it a prison of the mind. And I remember specifically, this is a couple weeks ago, I saw some joker on Twitter who was complaining about modern Star Trek shows. Mm-hmm. So in other words, stuff past, 2017 or whatever.
Okay.
All the new stuff. And he says, Star Trek Discovery isn't canon because blah, 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 blah. Star Trek Picard isn't canon because blah, 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 blah. Like just listing it down. And I read that and I'm like, first of all, what kind of grown-ass person is obsessing over this? And I said, in response to that, canon is a prison of the mind.
Can I say specifically, were they saying that if a character is behaving differently in a later series than they did in an earlier series, that was the issue they were having? Or was there some sort of logic, like a detail that was mentioned in an old series and the detail was not?
Yeah. I mean, without diving fully into the weeds of what this person was saying, essentially it was like, well, this show said X.
Yeah.
The original show said X and the new show says XY. Therefore, and just looking for ways to be like, nope, doesn't count. And so that's why I said that person. That's what I said in response to that. And Jacob says, that is a great turn of phrase. Can you expand what you mean by this? And here's the thing. I think headcanon is headcanon. Everyone has their headcanon, right?
Right.
We just were talking about Enemy of the State. My headcanon is that Gene Hackman is playing Harry Call, the same character he played in The Conversation.
Right.
That's headcanon. And there's little clues in the film. I showed you in one point in the movie, they have a picture of Hackman from The Conversation.
Right, yeah.
So it's a little nod to that. However, that's not official. That's just me having fun, right? Mm-hmm. And headcanon, you can do all kinds of stuff. You can be like, you know what? I choose to not even acknowledge, the sequel or whatever to this thing that I like because I didn't like the sequel. Hey, people do that all the time, right?
Sure.
But the whole like canon, quote unquote, is determined by the people who own the thing. That's just how it is.
Mm-hmm.
And beyond that, we're talking about fictional worlds. This is not history. Right. So in other words, if you and this could apply for Star Trek, it could apply for Star Wars, you name it. If you do a prequel to the thing that occurred previously, you can't be like, well, that previous thing never acknowledged this prequel, therefore the prequel doesn't count. It's like, well, it does now. That's just those are the games, right? Last retcon standing.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I think this is also something that just feels like we're going to have to get comfortable with because
yes,
in the age when there was a Star Wars trilogy, the end.
Yep.
That it was easier to sort of wrap your head around all the story being presented and whatnot. But in this day and age where IP is king and you are going to get more Star Wars till the end of time, like hopefully creatively, things that are worthwhile, but also just from a business standpoint, it's a business decision. Star Trek, Star Wars, whatever, like all these sequels, prequels, whatever, like that's just the way Hollywood as a business is working right now. So inevitably, soap operas used to get crap for this, right? It's like they have to tell a story every day. And so then, the guy who was killed is back, like you're my sister's cousin, like all the... It used to be like, oh, well, that's ridiculous. Well, that's just soap operas. And what are you going to do? They're on every single day and they have to keep coming up with stories. Well, now all the franchises we love have to keep coming up with stories. And so they have to find ways to continue making stories within those universes. And sometimes they're going to have to stretch a little bit, and
that's it. Yeah,
you hope they're being told by storytellers who care about the material. And I'd say most of the time they are. But inevitably, you're gonna have to stretch and add and do some extra things, and it will require a little just embracing and going, you know what, I get it. Thanks for making more of the stuff I like.
Yeah, or don't embrace it. Just be
Or
like, you know,
don't
what,
embrace
isn't
it.
for me.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean you have to like it.
Yeah.
Don't like it. That's fine too.
Exactly. Right. But there's this what's new or what feels more recent is the sense of I don't like this thing and therefore I need it to be officially stricken from I need a proclamation from on high that this is non-canon.
Right.
And I'm like, well, it's all fiction. We're not we're not documenting the history of the Republic. It's the American Republic. I mean, we are documenting the history of the Star Wars Republic, but like that's a good example, right? Like, you know, in in the Phantom Menace. Remember, for the first time, Brian, we saw Jedi zipping around, zip, 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 flying, doing right.
Yep.
We'd never seen that before, right? Based on the original 3.
Right.
Now, I don't know how other people reacted. I know how I reacted. I was like, oh, well, wow, we never saw that before.
Yeah.
So is it therefore rendered non-canonical because the previous movies didn't address that?
Yeah. And then going along with what I'm saying too, like, is if you keep adding to the story where you're going to have to keep coming up with the new and exciting things.
Yeah.
And so and by the way, the attitude that I have about this, so accepting of it and the love it or don't love it, that's fine. I didn't always have that attitude. I don't
we got there.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to sound like some person who thinks
it was a journey.
Yeah, it was a journey. And that's where I am now. And I would just say it feels a lot nicer here.
Look, I mean, this is like I saw this person specifically who, it was in reference to Star Trek, and it was like, there's a show right now called Strange New Worlds, which you saw a little bit of this past weekend, which is a prequel to the original series. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's set like 8 years before the old 60s show with William Shatner, and it's set on an Enterprise that is ostensibly the same Enterprise from that show. So in other words, this is the ship, and then Captain Pike, played by Anson Mount, hands it off to Captain Kirk, and then we get the original series. Okay. Now, visually, the Enterprise in this show is very different. It's bigger, it's a little more luxurious, whatever. And so this is me. I'm just like, well, you just kind of squint your eyes and say, yeah, but it's the same ship. But if you say no, the fact that it looks different is proof that it's non-canon. I'm like, well, this is all exhausting, and I'm like, fine, then it's not canon to you, I guess, whatever, right? Like, like does us, back in the day when they rebooted Superman in the comic books in like 1986, Alan Moore, he of Watchmen, right? He was asked to write the final Superman story, like they were ending the previous, continuity, write the final story, right?
Right.
And he wrote a story called "Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow," and the first page of that story, it says, "This is, the story of a hero," and blah blah blah, kind of just doing this whole thing, and it says this is an imaginary story. Like, in other words, this is like, let's imagine this is the last story of Superman, right? So, is it canon? Not necessarily, but he says this is an imaginary story, and then he does his thing, and then he says this is an imaginary story. Aren't they all? Right. And I've carried that with me for a long time, because ultimately it's all fiction. Right. And something being quote unquote canon or not does not diminish my ability to enjoy something. I mean, I've got, on my shelf here, I have 3 hardcovers containing the Marvel Comics Star Wars comics from the 70s and 80s. And they're wacky adventures set in between the movies.
Right.
And none of that is considered canon by anybody. It wasn't considered canon by Lucasfilm even before Disney. But you know what, Brian? I pick those. I read through those fairly frequently because I just enjoy reading them. They're fun.
It's funny you say that, because I'm realizing this now even about myself, where not even just the things that officially come out on TV or whatever, but I've said a couple times I was getting hungry for more Terminator stories recently.
Yeah.
And so I went out and I was like, well, are there books? And I wouldn't have done that maybe even like 5 years ago or 10 years ago, because I'd be like, well, yeah, but it's not from Cameron and it's not, so it's not, worth diving into because it's not the voice. It's not from the original voice. But I was like, no, all right, I'm willing to take a chance to see if I enjoy another story from another person. And, my brother is kind of the same way. And then I was telling you, he recently got into the Heir to the Empire.
Oh, sure.
And
yeah, that's a great example.
Yeah, and he's just not the type to even do that, to branch out into those things. But he's like, I want more Luke Skywalker stories.
Yeah.
And then he devoured that series. So, yeah.
I mean, they're
all imaginary. Have fun with them.
Exactly. So my thing is, what I don't like is when you have so-called fans of things who are trying to find excuses to tell other people not to enjoy what they're enjoying.
Yeah, like this
that
wasn't for me would be nice.
Yeah.
This wasn't for me.
Like, oh, you like that thing, you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, they just like it. That's it.
Right.
I mean, and see, I'd love to be like, oh, Brian, as you get older, you get more experienced and you realize it's like, yeah, but no, this is people our age doing this stuff.
Yeah. Which I there's something to be said about passion for something. It's fun. It's fun to like love something so much, but it's also, letting go and being more open-minded and willing to have fun again with it, maybe.
What a concept, right?
Right.
And again, it's in this industry when it comes to serialized storytelling, it's always the last retcon standing. That's just how it is.
Right.
Let's say this new Jurassic movie that they're coming out with. Let's say it says, oh, in the first film, they thought they were only making female dinosaurs, but actually, Dr. Wu made a mistake, and actually there were male and female dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm.
Just I'm not saying that would be a good idea to do. I'm just saying that's the type of thing that happens all the time.
Sure.
Now let's say that becomes the premise for this next movie, which I doubt. Well, does that fundamentally change our experience with that earlier film? No.
Yeah. It's funny, though. I keep going back to that soap opera example because I don't think we ever expected to have a 7th Jurassic Park.
That's true.
And at some point, you got to come up with something. And hey, I might not like it. I don't know. I wasn't really crazy about the last series, but that's first one of my favorite movies of all time, and nothing can change that.
And nothing can change that. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like the thing we were brainstorming over the weekend, the great Close Encounters / ET crossover movie.
Dude, I wish we should have written it down. It was
we went off, folks. We somehow, this was neither alcohol nor drug induced, but we went off on like a 40-minute, quite elaborate brainstorming session on this movie that will never get made.
Yeah.
For no reason but other than our own shits and giggles.
Yeah.
And it was hecka fun.
It was terrible and incredible at the same time.
It was credible.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think of y'all canon. I'm actually, and just to put a pin on this conversation, I like consistency. I prefer consistency to worrying about continuity.
Sure.
Because the continuity stuff takes care of itself. And when I say consistency, be consistent to the visual language, be consistent to characterization.
Mm-hmm.
As far as like all the little details, like, I'll give you a perfect example. Planet of the Apes, the original film. Brian, I don't know if you know this, but I happen to like that original Planet of the Apes quite a bit.
By the way, you put on a clip of it this weekend and literally word for word karaoke'd about 6 minutes of it. It was incredible.
Kept going too.
My only regret is that I didn't get it on film. It was amazing.
So that first film, when they crash land and Charlton Heston looks at the date meter, it says 3978. The next two sequels say, oh, the date meter said 3955.
Mm-hmm.
Well, by the logic of these people, obviously those sequels are non-canon. Right. And I'm of the mind says, okay, well, obviously that's a mistake because these are made by human beings and they make mistakes. So let's just find a way to explain it away or just roll with it.
Mm-hmm.
And, because ultimately it's for the stories that we're following, not for these little bits of minutia,
Yeah.
That's me. I don't know if that answers your question, Jacob. let us know. I mean, this has been a bugaboo of mine for a while, how people obsess over these things. But hey, maybe you feel differently. In which case, write in and give us your thoughts. But in the meanwhile, we're going to take another short break. All right. Well, kind of a slow week, Brian. Not a ton going on.
Yeah, that's my understanding. And also, we were kind of doing our own thing. I wasn't on my phone very much this weekend, so
that's a good thing.
Yeah, it was great.
So we were talking about Star Wars in the last block. I thought this was worth mentioning. The Acolyte is streaming right now on Disney Plus. The first 2 episodes dropped about a week ago, and per The Hollywood Reporter, it has given Disney Plus its best series opening of 2024. It says here, Disney Plus says the Star Wars series recorded the biggest opening for a show on the streamer so far this year, with the premiere episode recording 11.1 million views, i.e. the equivalent of that many complete showings of the 42-minute episode worldwide over 5 days. That equates to 426.2 million minutes or 7.77 million hours of watch time.
I think the complete showings detail is very interesting, right? So
that's the most important detail in there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So people watch the whole thing from beginning to end, in other words.
Yes. Maybe it's been more clarified in recent years, but I remember there was a time where streamers would say, oh, this many minutes and whatever, or this many people viewed this show, but they may have only watched the first 2 minutes of it and then turned it off. And so it was hard to know what they really meant, what the numbers really meant. So yeah, I mean, that many people watched the entire episodes. That's really impressive.
Yeah, so the first 2 episodes dropped, and now I saw them early because I did a review for the Chronicle, and I as far as I know, you have not watched any of The Acolyte as of yet.
No, I haven't had a chance yet. But this is one I've said.
Is
before,
that for lack of interest, or I was like, not for lack of interest, just lack of time.
Yeah, lack of time, because it came out on Tuesday, and I think you came out on Thursday, and I haven't really gotten to it yet. But this is one I like what I've seen and how it looks different than the others, and so it has my curiosity. So this is definitely one I will start up.
See, now what's interesting to me is that this is yet again one of our culture war, battle sites.
Yeah.
Presumably because there's a cast of predominantly women and people of color, but if you look at the Rotten Tomatoes critics score, it's hovering in the high 80s, early 90s. So I'm just glancing right now, 91% on Rotten Tomatoes, and then you look at the audience score, and it's like it's in the teens.
Yeah,
and I look at this and I'm like, this like picks up on what we were talking about in the last block, where it's just like, it's not the greatest Star Wars thing ever. It's just another Star Wars thing.
Yeah.
Better than some, not better than others. I've seen the first 4 episodes. I've liked what I've seen so far. I'm curious to see it continue. But big picture, it's just another Star Wars.
Yeah, and it's kind of sad that you can count on the fact that all these shows are just going to get review bombed.
Yes,
because I kind of want to know what people are thinking about it.
What they're actually thinking.
What they're actually thinking, and I write for Young Jedi Adventures. It's a show for freaking preschoolers, and even on IMDb, that show got review bombed. And you're like,
it did really?
Yeah, and you're like, are you?
Wow.
Who are these people? And
yeah.
I mean, the obvious joke with that show, because it deals with younglings, is like, oh, is the series finale them meeting Anakin? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, it's funny like the first time you hear it, but then it's like, well,
first, they
yeah, I mean, we can joke about that too. We're Star Wars fans, we get it, but like, then you get to the point where it's like, well, if you really want an answer, no, because this is like 100 or 200 years before that anyway, and there are
in that case, Brian, non-canon.
That's right, but no, it's during the High Republic, and it's like, and you apparently, if you're even commenting or upset about Star Wars, at one point you loved it, and this is to get a new generation to love it their own way, So we want people to love the thing we love. Like, where's the hostility coming from? Where's this like energy?
Because you have to love it the exact same way.
I guess. And I mean, look, I'll check the show out and maybe I won't like it. Who knows? But I just hate it's just this immaturity that just follows this series. It's just so depressing.
Well, that's what's sort of interesting to me is because you literally have filmmakers who have said, no, I don't want to work on Star Wars because who wants to deal with that shit?
Yeah, sure.
You know, and that's the thing, because what you realize is it doesn't matter who it is. Like it's remarkable. It's you know what it's like. It's like the conspiracies about the last election and it was stolen and this and that. And what you realize is a lot of these people are in this feedback loop where anything that negates their point of view, well, that's just they've been bought off, you know. And there's a lot of that here because you have like, you know, when Obi-Wan Kenobi came out and you had Ewan McGregor put out a statement in support of the actress who plays Reva in that show.
Yeah.
Right. And he was like, hey, you know, everybody just, you know, the Star Wars fans shouldn't act like this. It was a perfectly cromulent statement. Right. Oh, Ewan's been bought off. Oh, he's part of the problem. He's the enemy now, you know?
Right.
And I saw that again recently with the star of The Acolyte. Her name is Amanda Stenberg, right? She's from The Hate U Give. Mm-hmm. And she got like it was like a promo thing that Disney put out on Twitter or whatever. And it's just, she got a video greeting from Hayden Christensen. So it's her getting this thing. She opens the video and it's Hayden Christensen like, hey, Amanda, just want to say welcome to the family. And it's so great to, you know, I can't wait to see the show, whatever, you know? Oh, Hayden, he's been bought off. He's part of the system now, or whatever, you know? And I'm like, you all spent how many decades shitting all over Hayden Christensen?
That's a good point.
He is finally getting his moment.
Yeah.
And you can't even let him have that, you know? So it's like, and it's these arbitrary demarcation things, because truly, I having seen the first 4 episodes, and I don't know if you read my review, but in case you haven't, the show, I think from what I've seen so far, it's good. It has an interesting mystery. I want to see the rest. I want to see what happens. That, you know, and I'm like, well, what else do I want out of this?
Right.
You know what I mean? I've said this on the show before. As far as Star Wars, look, I got my 3.
Right.
My emotions are tied up in my 3, and everything else is gravy.
Right.
And nothing from now until the end of creation can affect my relationship with those 3 movies. Shit, George Lucas did a bunch of stuff to those movies, and it still didn't affect my love of those movies.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's like, when do we just say, look, man, like you said earlier, it's not for me. That's fine.
I mean, that's been kind of my experience, honestly. Like I am like the original trilogy is in my DNA. Yeah. I am passionate about those films. I mentioned I saw Empire Strikes Back in a theater about a year ago or so, and I was moved, like emotionally moved. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, this movie just touches me. I don't know how to explain it. It's, you know, and then these shows come out and they have mixed results for me, but then I move on to the next one, you know? And so it's like, well, hopefully I like this one. And, you know, but the thing, my love for Star Wars is immovable. So I don't know.
Yeah, and especially with Star Wars, right? Because we can look at like Obi-Wan Kenobi, which I know for a fact I liked more than you. But yeah, I mean, there's stuff in there that's sort of squeezing into the crevices of canon, if you will, right? Sure. It retcons this and it retcons that. And I'm like, did you guys watch the prequels? Because those are jammed full. The whole prequels trilogy is a retcon.
Right.
And they're jammed full of this stuff. You know what I mean? Like,
you know what's interesting? Like, maybe for a generation, maybe it isn't.
I mean, I guess. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah. Not as a defense, but maybe it helps to understand, like, for if these are younger people that are review bombing. It's just interesting. They have more material that they think is canon. So it's what we do.
It's these arbitrary demarcation points.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Because to me, I don't see anything Obi-Wan Kenobi, the show, does vis-a-vis retconning that's any more egregious than what the prequels did.
Yeah, sure.
I'm just like, it's all and I'm just like, look, you can like or dislike. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's all it's all in the mix. I mean, it is what it is.
Right.
So with this show, I'm like, at the very least, it's 100 years before the Phantom Menace. They're not stepping on anything, as far as we know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a story in the Star Wars universe. Why do we have to bitch? Why the bitching, Brian? It's the bitching.
What is it? What's that quote from Silence of the Lambs?
The incessant bitching?
No, it's just like it's like the noise that keeps her up at night or whatever.
Yes. Clarice, does the bitching of the Star Wars fans still keep you up at night?
Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Zaki.
Dr. Lecter, is that you? Do you still hear them when you close your eyes? The whiny bitches.
I knew I could count on you.
Complaining about black women in Star Wars. Do you hear them, Clarice?
It's perfect. I wish I could have conjured it, but I
By the way, in this show, Lee Jung Jae, he plays Jedi Master Soul, and he is so awesome in this show. I'm like, man, give me more of this character. You know, he's that actor is from Squid Game, which I know you saw.
Mm-hmm.
Just great. I'm like, you know, is this what we're complaining about? Like having this? Oh no, diversity. Yeah, if we're getting actors like this, that's a good thing. You know.
Man, yeah, I liked him in Squid Game. Just thinking of that, that's like the last streaming series to come out of nowhere that like blew my hair back.
See, I need to watch it.
Man, that was like a moment. My sister-in-law was out here for that, and she was just like, "Oh, you heard of this? Want to watch this?" I was like, "Okay," and it was too violent for Federica, but me and Ella is her name. Me and Ella, we were just like, "Whoa!" And that became our thing while she was out here visiting, and at night. Nice. Federica would go in another room and we would just be like, whoa, like devouring Squid Game. And it was such a moment. But
yeah, I mean, and it was very zeitgeisty. Everybody was talking about it.
Yeah. But I can see him playing a Jedi Master. So
yeah, really good. And the premise of the show is an interesting one. It's basically, it's like this, you've got somebody who's killing Jedi Masters.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's the why, like it's tied up with something that happened several years ago.
Sounds like a unique hook I have not heard before.
So we've never gotten a story like that, at least in live action. I don't know what the books and stuff. I'm like, it's something different. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't. But how about this? You just let people who like it.
I have to say that unique hook is what makes me interested in it.
Yeah. So. I mean, I truly, just given what we're talking about, I think that's what it comes down to. It's not just that, oh, I want you to be a fan of this thing that I like. It's you have to be a fan the exact same way I'm a fan.
Mm-hmm.
And actually that makes a lot of sense to me, because I remember even, you know, people our age who grew up disliking the Star Wars prequels, who are like, when I have kids, I have to make sure they don't see the prequels.
I'm guilty of that.
Yeah, right?
I'll admit
it. You know? And then again, you just realize as you get older,
yeah.
Well, they're just looking at it in a different way.
Totally.
I mean, this is the thing. For us, it was a 3-part saga, right? And then they added 3. Mm-hmm. For the later generation, it was a 6-part saga. And what we're going to realize is, guess what? Moving forward, it's going to be a 9-part saga.
Yep.
And that's just what it is. So you like it or dislike it, that's just how it's going to be looked at, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, let's take another short break, and then we got our big discussion for this episode. And we are back, and you know who else is back, Brian?
Who's that, Zaki?
Why, it's detectives Mike Lowry and Marcus Burnett.
And it's about time.
It's been what? 4 long years.
Yeah, this was like one of the pre-pandemic, right before everything went down movies. This was like the only blockbuster of 2020 or 2020. Yeah.
Yeah, basically you had Bad Boys for Life, you had Sonic the Hedgehog, and like The Invisible Man, and that was it that year.
Yep.
But Bad Boys 4 comes out 4 years after the third one, making it the shortest gap between Bad Boys movies ever.
Oh, and you know what? That makes sense, because when it came back for 3, I think it was a little bit of a wild card.
Yes.
How it would perform. And I remember we liked it, and it did really well. And so, hey, Why not? Let's do it.
They got in there. It opened to the tune of $56 million, which is certainly a bump up from, Furiosa opening to less than half that 2 weeks prior.
I think Furiosa is currently at 58 million.
Really?
So,
domestically?
Yeah, so there's that.
Freaking yikes. Okay, well, that's just sad because we both really liked that movie.
It's crazy to me. I mean, I understand we've talked about this in that episode that I might have got swept up in the Fury Road was amazing. I think everybody loves it, don't they? Kind of it all. And I realize that Furiosa is not a movie for everybody. So it's never going to be like a gargantuan hit. But I mean, what was it? Something, If. I think If passed it, which had been out weeks before.
Yeah.
So,
If, I mean, and Garfield.
Furiosa, yeah. So Furiosa is just dropping like a stone, unfortunately.
Yeah, it will be discovered, and guess what? A big picture doesn't matter because the money neither came out of our pockets or goes into our pockets. It is a great movie that is worth watching, and hopefully it will be found and given it'll have a long afterlife. I'm certain of that.
I think so.
But that said, Bad Boys Ride or Die, it cost around $100 million.
Mm-hmm.
And it's already made $56 million domestically. This is like all upside for Sony, which has been quite stingy in recent years in terms of keeping budgets under tight constraints, and this is under the auspices of President Tom Rothman. I'm going to say he's had the right approach.
Yeah, kind of seems that way. I know worldwide Bad Boys opened to over 100 million, so it made its budget back worldwide in its first weekend. So yeah, I mean, 100 million feels good for this. And by the way, it feels like an expensive movie.
Yes,
I mean it's the money was employed perfectly. It feels like the movie it wanted to be all along anyway. No cut corners. So this is what we're talking about. Spend wisely.
Spend wisely, and this is a conversation you and I had over the weekend with our friend Sean Coyle. Like, do movie stars matter anymore? And what I said is, movie stars plus the right franchises matter. Case in point, Bad Boys.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if they try to do a reboot of this with some random Joes, it's not going to work because Bad Boys is Will Smith and Martin Lawrence.
Mm-hmm.
So you put these guys in the movie with this title, people will show up.
Right.
That's my takeaway anyway.
Makes sense to me.
Now the thing is that of course people already heard us sort of take a mallet to the first movie.
I wouldn't go that far.
A couple days ago. Well, I think we were gently ribbing is how I would characterize it.
Yeah, all right. Maybe in my mind I didn't mean to go that far, but
playful ribbing is how I would say it. That's
sure.
In my opinion. That said, I've said before, I think the third movie was a step up from the previous two, and I think this fourth one sits very comfortably alongside the third one for me. I think it's I was thoroughly engaged. I laughed. I leaned forward in my seat, and I was not looking at my watch because this movie is under 2 hours long, which is the exact right amount of time for a movie like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is what we keep saying, like, why are movie runtimes getting longer and longer? When you watch a movie then that is under 2 hours that feels like a complete story and packs so much in, you're like, oh, they did it.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't you? But yeah, dude, I had a blast with this movie, and it is what it is, by the way. Like I was thinking about how much I liked it, but I also recognize that it's very much its own thing. It's its own vibe. It's its own tone. And I don't know if that, as just capital A action movie, will be for everyone. But like this,
yeah, it will not.
Yeah, yeah. And because the aesthetic of it is elevated, if you want to, or cartoonish even occasionally, at times, but I feel like it's a natural evolution from where we started with the energy that Smith and Lawrence were bringing all along. I feel like it's settled into this nice little reality for itself.
Yes. Yeah. I made the comment that the Miami of these movies is like it might as well be Mordor or somewhere else in Middle Earth, where it's this realm of just pure fantasy, right? I've never been to Florida, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't look like this, you know?
Yeah, I mean, like Bayisms aside, with the first one, I was a little surprised when I revisited it that it felt kind of grounded.
Yes.
You know, aside from like over the top explosions and whatnot at the end, but it felt more grounded than I remember, because I know the second one is, like you said, like a wind fan in your face. But but this one I feel like found that perfect in between of like the characters acting a little silly. Like there's at the beginning when Martin Lawrence goes into that convenience store and literally has his nose like pressed against a window where there's hot dogs behind it, like a child. Yeah. And I was like, that's ridiculous. And I'm laughing. Like it's hilarious. Like it's right. It's leaned into that.
It's part of the language of these films, I think, you know?
Exactly. And like the third act has like an alligator named Duke. Of course it does. You know, like it's that's what we're doing here, you know? And I was on board. I was on board.
I agree. I was thinking about how these films, it's almost like they occupy this middle ground between the Lethal Weapon franchise and the Fast and Furious franchise.
Yeah, that's really well put. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Because this is the thing with Fast and Furious, you watch movie one and it's got a certain tone, and by the 10th one, you're like, well, I don't even know how we ended up here.
That's funny. Yeah, it's so, you know, that's the thing too. Something I wrote down was I really enjoyed the cinematography of this movie that I might not necessarily enjoy in another movie.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, it's for it fits with this universe.
Yes, exactly. It's I wouldn't say it calls attention to itself, but it's very, very over the top.
Yes,
but it like worked and felt cool because that's what this movie's doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because the last time you and I saw a movie in a theater together was a couple months ago with Madam Web.
Oh yeah.
Right. And this movie utilizes some of the same techniques in that movie.
I don't even remember.
So yeah, like stuff like the camera does this, and then it like spins, and the whole scene kind of spins around, but it's a camera move, you know?
Oh sure, yeah.
And this is my point: is watching Madam Web. I remember I found it distracting, whereas this, I'm like, well, this is just part of the language of these movies, right? And yeah, I want to mention Adil Al Arbi and Bilal Fallah, who directed this one. They also directed the last one. I think that they do Michael Bay style action better than Michael Bay.
You know, to be fair, I went on and on in our commentary about how impressed I was with the visual style of Bay in the original Bad Boys. When I was seeing how over the top this felt, I actually had a thought that in 1995, for older critics, that movie must have felt over the top and like a cartoon. So I thought it was, as you continue to escalate, because you have to with your sequels and get bigger and bigger, this felt like a natural progression, a natural outgrowth from where we started to continue to get bigger that still feels true to the voice of these movies.
Yeah. These guys, though, man, you know, the movie ends and I'm just like, there is a whole ass Batman related movie that these guys made that them bastards at Warner Brothers are just going to keep in a drawer forever.
Isn't that insane? A freaking Michael Keaton Batman movie exists.
Yeah, it exists. And per, you know, the commentary at the time, it was unwatchable. And having watched this, I call bullshit on that. I don't believe for 1 second that's the case.
I do too. And in the same breath, I was like, what did that movie look like after watching this?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm very, very curious.
I mean, I think that this film, what it really figures out is we are coming to this franchise to touch base with these characters again.
Yeah.
And I think they've found the right groove for each character to occupy. This was kind of my critique of the first film, where it's like Will and Martin both need to be the badasses. And I think they finally figured out, no, Martin is the goofball, and that's what works.
Yeah, in the first one, they both had their shirts open, billowing,
exactly,
getting their slow-mo action, jumping on a car shots.
Yes.
And yes, now Mike is the suave, even though he gets married in this, but he's like the suave. He's the badass.
Yes.
And Marcus is like kind of funny and a little woo woo. You know what I mean? Like,
A little woo woo.
which I loved, like he has his sort of, well, I don't know, maybe that's like too much detail, but I loved what happened to him, in the first act and how that carries out the way that he experiences this movie and the little bits of wisdom or insight or whatever he's giving to Mike throughout. It delineates them. It makes them super specific and fun to bounce off of one another.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do we want to talk spoilers?
Yeah, I think everything else I want to talk about as a spoiler. So let's do it.
All right.
Spoilers.
All right, Brian, spoil me.
Well, right off the bat, I thought it was funny to see Michael Bay in this movie.
Yeah. So, it's like it's like The Godfather. He's there to give it his blessing,
Yeah, it was kind of funny. It amused me to see him. He basically almost runs over Martin Lawrence's character and is like, "Hey, get out of the road." Right. And then at the end of that sequence, I'm sorry, I'm gonna butcher this name, but this TikTok guy named, I think it's KB. It's either KB LeMay or KB Lame. He's Italian, and he is hugely popular on like TikTok and Instagram and stuff. And he's known for sort of, he'll mock sort of like overly complicated existing videos. So someone's showing you, here's how you make an omelet, but they do this like way stupid, complicated version of it. It'll then cut to this guy, and without using any words, he'll just show you this: crack an egg, put it in the pan, and then he'll just shrug like, what's the deal? Why does it have to be so hard? And then, it doesn't sound funny at all when I say it, but he's hilarious. His facial expressions are hilarious, and he gets to be in this movie and do that and shrug after something happens at Will Smith. And I was like, it made me really happy to see him. So.
Yeah, I mean, you were like the DiCaprio meme, like pointing at the screen.
I was, yeah.
and I couldn't make heads or tails of what you were saying. So, vis-a-vis Michael Bay, worth mentioning, he is not a producer on this or the previous film.
Wow. Well, isn't that kind of cool then? There's like a weird sort of, passing of the torch, respect.
Yeah.
Game recognized game, whatever you want to call it, like between them. That's nice. I like that.
That's what I thought. I was like, it'd be one thing like, okay, he's got some skin in the game here.
Yeah, right. But no, just respect. I started this. You guys are taking it. You have my blessing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
With that in mind, I mean, they did dip into like the continuity quite a bit, right? Because the hacker guy from the first movie.
Yeah, I was gonna say this is a true sequel to the last film, and I almost wish I had even gone on Wikipedia and reminded myself a little bit of the story, because I was like, wait, Will Smith has a son? Wait, yeah, what? I couldn't remember a lot of this stuff, but yeah, I mean, and also, we lose the Joe Pantoliano character, right, in the last film, and so his death is the whole plot is about him.
Yes. I liked that. In the previous film, that moment stayed with me. I remember, he has kind of a heart-to-heart moment with Mike, and then, he gets killed. And I remember watching the movie at the time. I was like, man, that really came out of nowhere. And like, that's a kind of a ballsy move, because generally you want to hang on to your legacy characters, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But what I like is that this movie, not only does it revolve around his character, Captain Howard, but I mean, Joey Pants is in the movie in new footage.
Mm-hmm.
So he remains part of the world. I appreciated that.
Yeah, we get him in these videos where if you're seeing this, that means I'm already dead.
Yes.
Kind of thing. So he's got to give the clues.
Well, plus these visions in the afterlife.
Which is wild. Yes. When you really think about it, when you watch the first movie.
That's the thing we're doing in this movie. Like we're visiting beyond the grave and having messages from dead people. That's what we're doing here.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of Black Panther. That sort of
yes, yeah, right.
Their vision of heaven or whatever it is.
Yeah,
and but it's like, even when it was happening. Well, so basically, yeah, we can talk now. Martin Lawrence's character has this heart attack, and it's filmed so beautifully. Right?
Yeah,
where he falls through the ground into water, and he's witnessing them trying to take care of him, but then he goes to this sort of, like you say, like heavenly area, and sees Captain Howard, and I was expecting a joke,
Right.
like a, oh wow, it's so good to see you, and him like, snap out of it, kind of a
Yeah.
thing, and they didn't. It was
No.
just straight up sweet.
He just says it's not your time.
Yeah, like, don't they hug? Like, he gives a sincere, humorless hug, just really, really sweet. Whispers something in his ear, says it's not your time, and that's the end of that. And I was like, oh man, no, of course I'm in for this. Like, something that can be action packed and kind of bonkers, but also take its heart seriously at the same time. I mean,
Yes.
I love it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that going back to what I was saying earlier about sort of at least for me, it ended up being it's the relationships between the characters that keep me coming back.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, I mean, we're now coming up on 30 years since the first movie. I'm invested in the Mike and Marcus relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see what new adventures they get up to.
And they also should add, so Marcus has his health scare, but Mike, who's the cool and collected action hero one, I mean, he's now getting panic attacks.
Yes.
Right? They give him something that kind of comes with aging, and also he's married now, and he's got more to think about. And I like that they give them these character appropriate sort of setbacks for them to have to fight through.
You're exactly right. And to me, this was my critique of the earlier film, of the first film, where I'm like, it feels like preening for a music video, and I just fundamentally am less interested in that than characters having to overcome issues,
Right.
And giving Will Smith feet of clay that he has to play through. Well, that's interesting. Giving Martin this whole thing and their banter. I mean, that was my issue with the first movie. I'm like, look, the chemistry between them is off the charts, no matter what. But I'm like, give them a script that is sturdy. Well, this, I mean, it's not David Mamet, but it's a solid script for them to be in.
And that, now that we've done the research for the commentary, it kind of makes sense because they didn't like the script that they were shooting. So
that's right.
Bay was having them improvise things on the spot. And I don't think I actually dropped this during the commentary, but I had read that there's a scene where Will Smith's character is razzing Martin Lawrence's character, and he calls him a bitch. Mm-hmm. And Martin Lawrence went to Michael Bay and was like, what the hell is that about? You just call me a bitch. Like, and then Bay was like, well, call him a bitch back. So it's like they were finding it as they were making it. Right. And so now these characters have been established, and you have the screenwriters writing for them. Right. For these actors.
That reminds me of when you and I recorded our first test episode and you kept calling me a bitch.
I know. And I was like, well, call me one back.
Yeah. We figured out our groove, but it took a minute. Once I wiped my tears away.
Actually, it'd be more funny if it was your wife who said that.
I was like, well, come on, go say it back to him. Yeah.
Right.
No, the thought I had was, if you remember, for the last, whatever it was, 2 years, there was like this tempest in a teapot conversations, like, is Will Smith still a movie star?
Yeah, I mean, you have to address it. I mean, post-slap at the Oscars. I mean,
post-slap. So he slapped Chris Rock, and then, well, has he forever tarnished his movie star bona fides? And I say, well, no. The answer is no. People still showed up, and they don't care that much about that.
It's kind of easy to forget now that we're past that and this worked out. But I mean, in that moment, that was stunning. I mean, it was a guy who had been so lovable for decades, and then to just see this anger unleashed, it was so out of character. It was so out of the character of Will Smith that we know. He's perfectly created this character of Will Smith, even through his social media, and he just come up with a book too. It all shattered before our eyes.
I know,
and it was like, will we ever be able to look at him the same way? How is he going to rehabilitate himself from something like that? Like, there were so many questions, and it is kind of fascinating now living in this moment to be like, well, he just did.
Well, that's it, and that tells you something. Where a lot of this is what drives the commentariat, but big picture, people aren't paying attention to that stuff, right? And let me just say, look, he should not have slapped Chris Rock. He should not have acted that way. I'm not in any way defending that. I am saying I think it's okay to let people move past their mistakes, depending on the mistake. Let me clarify. But in this particular mistake, I think he expressed remorse.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, again, it's you know what I mean? Like, it's like you watch this movie and you're like, well, this is why he's a star.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's never not watchable.
Mm-hmm. He's effortlessly a star.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
just coming from it personally, I can't remember if I said this to you in real life or on the commentary, but Will Smith almost felt like one of my first people, because when I was 10, I want to say, that's when Fresh Prince first aired. And so I used to watch the shows my parents watched. You know, I'd watch like MASH reruns at night, or I'd watch like half of Simon and Simon or something, you know, like, but
right.
Fresh Prince was my show. I tuned in every Monday night to watch that, and I love Will Smith. And then he was in Independence Day, and I love Men in Black. He's been my guy since I was 10 years old.
Right.
And so it was really hard to see that moment happen. But I still loved him. And unlike the Mel Gibsons of the world who've let us down, I believed his apology.
Yeah.
I really believe that he regretted it. He seems like the type of person who just maybe has been bottling something in, trying to appear perfect for so long, and it cracked. And there's no excuse for that. But the fact that he apologized for it, I believe him. You know, at some point it's like, well, maybe not everybody will be able to move forward with him, but I have.
Yeah, and I think audiences have too. Just to underscore what you're saying. I mean, the fact that the box office did what it did as it pertains to this movie says people, at the end of the day, people like Will Smith. They like him in these films, and you know that tells you something. And it's gratifying that I think for, at least for me, this one lived up to the promise of the last one. Like, it feels like a natural progression. I remember walking out of the third one and just being utterly delighted.
Yeah.
This one ended, I was like, man, that was a blast, you know? At the end of the day, when we talk about like, oh, audiences aren't turning up, it's like, well, they are. We need to pay closer attention to what they're turning up for.
I think we're still in that phase where we're learning.
Yeah.
You know, it's some of it's obvious, some of it isn't. We're just in the infancy of the new world of theatrical movie going, you know, and so this is another chapter, and we're going to have to learn all over again.
Yeah, it is gratifying to see that there is still an audience for a movie like this, which is very much a throwback, but it's not a legacy sequel in the sense that, you know, it's not like a decades later revisitation. It's a sequel to the movie from 3 years ago. 4 years
and it's
ago.
Also not like we were talking about this before we watched it, but they had introduced those younger characters, you know, Vanessa Hudgens, in the last one. And we were wondering in this one how big a role they would have. And also if the filmmakers were maybe thinking, well, they can take it over, you know, sort of like a Star Wars sequels sort of thing where we get our heroes are involved, but we're handing over the reins a little bit. And that's not happening. That's not what this is. Like, this is our stars are still the stars.
Did you not get a small sense that they're trying to do something by way of Marcus's son and Mike's son being like legacy characters?
That's interesting. You know, no, and I don't mean that as a criticism,
right?
But I did not spark to them as much.
No, I agree with you on that, but
yeah.
I don't think it's an accident that you have a scene where Marcus's son just straight up goes Liam Neeson and Taken through this house.
Dude, that scene was so funny and badass.
Yep.
The way, it's his son-in-law, right? Marcus's.
Yes.
And then just, you know, he's this military guy, and Mike and Marcus are having to watch through a monitor because they're not there, and Marcus's family is in peril from these like guys coming in, like these assassins, and just watching him be like, okay, but he's doing it with like all the military prestige, like saluting to the camera and everything, and just doing his damn job. You know what I mean? Just dispatching like 15 people, but with like precision, like military precision. And then at the end, him just saluting to Marcus through the camera, like, aye, all done.
All done.
Dude, that was so good. And even he gets his moment at the end at the barbecue, where through his own unique way, he doesn't impose anything on these guys who are our heroes, who are badasses. He just exists as himself, and he still gets to be the guy who operates the grill. And then when he breaks the fourth wall and smiles at the camera, I was dying.
And so that character Reggie is in Bad Boys 2.
Okay,
which I had no idea about. So
I don't remember.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember that movie, and I don't really feel like watching it. But that's what's funny to me is that he's in the second movie, he's like wanting to take out Marcus's daughter.
Yeah,
and like Mike and Marcus are picking on him.
Okay. Well, you know what? I do remember that vaguely.
Vaguely, right? So it's funny to me that somehow he's gotten like grandfathered in as like if you look at his intro there, and then you get this badass scene here. It's like a nice arc for that character,
Totally. I thought that was a lot of fun. And then, the other scene that had me, I just have to throw it out there just because I thought it was so funny. But basically, Marcus, his whole sort of character detail is that he loves sugary foods, but his family's saying it's not healthy for him. And so then basically they're at a shootout, and these like jelly beans are flying in the air, and then like a like a thing of punch has been punctured by a bullet, so this little stream is coming out. And then during the shootout in slow motion, Marcus is like holding out his tongue, trying to get just a taste of the jelly bean. That's like the hardest I've laughed in a while in the theater.
It was classic.
I laughed so hard the way they shot that.
Now, in terms of a critique, I don't even know if this is a critique, but it's an observation. Like Ioan Gruffudd, who turns out to be the villain, might as well have had like "I'm the villain" like tag on his shirt. Because in like scene 1, he's at Mike's wedding. He should have been like, "Hey, Mike, look forward to betraying you later."
Yes. Yeah.
Right. I was like, it would have been a twist if he wasn't the bad guy.
That's really funny. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The relation so Mike gets married at the beginning of this movie, and I had to look it up, and his wife is not a character in the previous film.
I couldn't remember if she had been introduced. Yeah.
So the previous film kind of played on the chemistry with Rita, who's played by Paula Nunez, and I thought that was kind of weird to me. I was like they set up. I don't know. I was like, that should have been something that they continued on with, because I just feel like even in this movie, Will and her have chemistry together.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what the thinking was with that.
See, they should have had Rita's boyfriend in league with Will's wife. Let me rephrase. Mike's wife. Not
yeah.
And then they're both single at the end. There, see, you solve problems that way.
I like that. I can see that. And he's even maybe that like tips it too much, but I was going to say maybe he's even a little jealous or skeptical or something, because he's still something for her. No.
Now the son, Armando.
Yeah.
At the end, they have the whole thing like, Ray Seahorn is Sam Gerard in this movie, basically.
Dude, I think I nudged you, or I looked at you, because the scene where she's like, "All right, everybody, listen up!" Like trying to
a hard target search. Yeah.
It was like almost that overhead shot was. You may as well just taken that frame out of the future.
I don't doubt for a second that it played some role in how they decided to frame it. Right?
Totally.
But I practically expected Mike to be like, "Family" at the end of this.
It kind of got there, didn't
it? They're just this side of Fast and Furious.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say,
I'm not saying in a bad way. But
I like
it. The barbecue. We got the family barbecue at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, and even I know Fast and Furious gets a lot of like ribbing about that, but like I do love that is a component of those stories. I think it's what
Oh
makes them
no.
kind of unique.
Oh, I'm totally with you.
Yeah, yeah,
Before Fast and Furious, I didn't know the value of family in my life.
that's hilarious.
So and I jumped on those sequels late. I already had a couple kids before I heard Dominic Toretto say "Salud mi familia"
You're like, look what I had all along.
all along. You know, I don't drink, but I have to Corona anyway, just for the.
Right. Just kind of hold it in your fingers and nod at your family from the corner.
That's right.
Like,
It's all thanks to Dom. So
yeah, with like a little purr.
Salud. But anyway, Bad Boys, ride or die. It's a thumbs up from me.
Thumbs up for me too. I mean, it's just, I love that it's true to itself. I think, yeah, they've really realized the potential of all the ingredients they've always had. I think the action was super unique. Again, I don't even know. I'd love this, the way they capture this action in another movie. I might have thought it was too over the top, but it was like cool and fun and innovative in this story in particular.
I totally agree, and I think based on the box office thus far and the fact that it has an A- cinema score, which means that viewers are liking it, I suspect before too long we'll be back here talking about Bad Boys 5.
I'm in for it. I'm not tired of watching Mike Lowry and Marcus Burnett's adventures.
Not yet.
Yep.
But hey, let us know your thoughts on Bad Boys Ride or Die. You can email us at moviefilmpodcast@gmail.com. You can also hit like on our Facebook page, facebook.com/moviefilmpodcast, and message us there. If you're looking for me online, you can find me on social media at Zaki's Corner. That's Zakis Corner. That means Twitter and Threads and Blue Sky and Instagram. I am there under that name. And head over to the San Francisco Chronicle. You can read some of my latest stuff. I got my review of The Acolyte, a review of the Garfield movie, and coming up soon, my review of Ultraman, the new Netflix movie, which is a revival of the old TV show. Oh, also at IGN, I have my 30th anniversary retrospective of Speed, one of the greatest action movies ever made, and I had fun digging into that one. What about you, Brian?
Well, I was going to say, I told you I was just scrolling through Reddit last night. And by the way, you were finishing that article when you were here at my place and you posted it or sent it, turned it in. And then you leave and I go on Reddit and I scroll. And then what do I see? But I see your article about Speed posted on Reddit and everybody loving it. And it's been upvoted like crazy. And
no way, that's great.
It was a really, really funny, like, whoa, he was just writing it on this couch next to me.
Fun. Yeah. What's funny, see, the plan I had was that morning, Thursday, the day I was coming, I was getting dropped off a little earlier because my son had to go to work. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be at the airport for like an hour and a half so I can get my writing done there before I get on the plane. That was my plan.
Yeah.
And so my son, he took me to this. By the way, my son is now old enough to drive, which I didn't realize. Like, wow, what a convenience that is as well.
That's nice.
There's little things. So he drops me off and he leaves because first day of work he's got to be there. So he takes off. So I get out the car. I pull out my phone with my boarding pass, and I was dropped off at the Oakland airport. It turns out I needed to be at the San Jose airport. So my shoulders slump.
Yep.
I'm like, so I call an Uber to haul my ass, 45 miles in the other direction.
Man, what was the time span you had to work with?
This was, I had basically from the point my son dropped me off to the plane leaving was about an hour and 40 minutes.
Wow.
So I mean, amazingly, I got there on time. I got on the plane. My bag wasn't even checked late. Like everything worked out in that regard. But for the fact that hour and a half I had planned to just be writing,
yeah, right,
was snatched away from me. So that's why I got to your place. I'm like, listen, man, I just gotta sit down and get this thing done.
Well, it paid off. So
I had fun diving into that movie. And by the way, if folks, if you want to delve into our archives, we did a commentary track for Speed 5 years ago for its 25th anniversary, which I have to say turned out pretty good. It was a good track. I think people enjoy listening to it.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Anything you want to say before we go?
Yeah, well, I always mention at the end of the episode that episodes I've written for Young Jedi Adventurers are available. but I'm referring to season 1. And hopefully by now you've seen season 1. And now I'm happy to announce today that season 2 new episodes are going to be dropping on August 14th on Disney Plus and Disney Junior. So even more Young Jedi adventures to enjoy.
Well, there we go. And as for us, you can please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review, leave a star rating if you like what we're doing. We have coming up next week a commentary track. I'm not going to say what, but I'm looking forward to doing that one with Brian. And we will be back soon. Thanks, everybody. Catch you next time.
Welcome, friends, it's the Movie Film Podcast. Movie Film Podcast, enjoy the show. Zaki and Brian are talking about movies. Movie Film Podcast on the radio.